Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Lubega has not simply entered the building. That is not the case. As the United States continued to hit Iran with one blow after another, these are the 5 most significant strikes. Both the regime and all of Iran's significant military assets had been destroyed, and the regime had been completely overthrown. The United States of America accomplished something against Iran that should not have been conceivable, and it capped it all off with a strike against a vital piece of territory that may serve as the launching pad for a ground invasion. We will begin with the most important part of the region, which is Kharg Island. The revelation that the United States had launched a huge strike against Kharg Island, which is located approximately 24 kilometers or 15 miles off the coast of Iran, was reported to have been disclosed on March 12th. This island is an essential component of Iran's oil sector. Yet the United States has not yet targeted the oil infrastructure that is located on that island, at least not yet. It was reported by the BBC that the United States of America targeted more than 90 separate targets, which included missile storage bunkers, naval mine storage facilities, air defenses, a helicopter hangar, and an airport control tower. The catastrophic strikes that the United States carried out on that island completely destroyed the military infrastructure that had been constructed there. When seen from a military point of view, this amounts to the complete and total neutralization of Kharg Island, and Iran is everything but pleased about this development. In the aftermath of the attack, Iran issued a threat that all oil and energy infrastructure on the island that belongs to companies that are working with the United States would be immediately destroyed and turned into a pile of ashes. This threat is obviously intended to imply that hitting Kharg Island will be more detrimental to the United States than it will be to Iran. Regarding this island, oil is in fact the most important factor. However, not in the manner in which Iran is striving to stake its claim to it. As a matter of fact, the numbers demonstrate that Kharg Island is of much more significance to Iran in terms of oil and gas than it will ever be to the United States of America or any other country. According to Euronews, Kharg Island is the most significant oil terminal in Iran's whole export system. Kharg Island is located in the Persian Gulf. Approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports leave the country through this island. From there, they all sail across the Strait of Hormuz and on to client nations like as China and other purchasers in Asia. Consider the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, the actions that the United States is taking in that region constitute one of the 5 major strikes. The island of Kharg is essential to Iran because it provides deep-water ports that enable supercarriers to carry crude oil. When it is operating at its peak, Kharg Island is capable of loading between 1.3 and 1.6 million barrels of crude oil per day. As a result of the water being too shallow, these carriers are unable to use a significant number of Iran's mainland coastal ports. The BBC also notes that oil and gas are essential to Iran's economy, which is not doing well. Energy is the only industry that can truly help to sustain Iran when it is struggling under the weight of heavy sanctions that prevent it from being an effective trade partner in any other arena. The regime of the country holds power over more than 10% of the world's proven oil reserves, in addition to 15% of its gas reserves. Over the past few years, Iran's oil income have been seeing a steady increase. According to the Tehran Times, the company's sales reached $46 billion in 2024, which represented a 14% increase from the previous year's total and a total of $5.6 billion more than what it had sold in 2023. It does not take a genius to figure out that attacks on Kharg Island have the potential to destroy Iran's entire economy, if it is the case that 90% of Iran's oil is transported through the island before being exported. In addition, This is an economy that was not doing especially well even before the United States began Operation Epic Fury. According to estimates coming from the BBC, the value of Iran's currency has decreased by 95% in comparison to the dollar since May of 2018. The situation in Iran's economy was the impetus for the demonstrations that took place in late December and early January, which finally resulted in the war that we are witnessing right now. It would be financially disastrous for the Iranian leadership to lose its oil facilities on Kharg Island. Due to the fact that the United States is concentrating its first round of strikes on military targets, it has not. Nevertheless, the fact that a first round was mentioned indicates that the United States is leaving its options open. The United States of America issued a warning shot by carrying out these initial strikes, which resulted in the destruction of everything that Iran possessed that might safeguard Kharg Island. Next up are the oil facilities, which President Donald Trump of the United States of America has said in a half-joking manner that the United States might strike a few more times just for fun. Those in power in Iran are not laughing. The United States is aware that it is in control of the situation on Kharg Island, and it is prepared to launch another attack at any moment in order to cut off Iran's oil supply. Despite the fact that the attacks on Kharg Island might possibly have an effect on Iran's stance in the Strait of Hormuz, that is not the case. Let us move on to the second of the Big Five, which is Iran's military capabilities that have been totally devastated. From the moment that the United States of America initiated Operation Epic Fury in conjunction with Israel's Operation Roaring Lion, it has been tearing down the military infrastructure of Iran. The leadership of the nation on February 28th, which was the first day of Operation Epic Fury, is the starting point for this. Trump made the announcement that 48 of Iran's political and military leaders have been eliminated, including Ali Khamenei, who had previously served as Iran's supreme leader. The United States and Israel continued to attack Iran's command structure, which had the apparent knock-on effect of causing the totality of Iran's military response to be in disarray. This was followed by a large number of additional attacks. When viewed from that perspective, the data present a very unsettling reading for the remnants of Iran's leadership. According to a report by the Institute for the Study of War, Israel is asserting that its attacks have destroyed as much as 80% of Iran's air defenses. In addition, the Israeli Defense Forces, popularly known as the IDF, assert that they have destroyed almost 70% of Iran's missile launchers. Iran has lost one of the most significant dangers that it could have posed to the Allied forces that are constantly showering gunfire down on its country. This is indicative of the fact that Iran has lost one of its most significant threats. Iran is unable to take any action to prevent the United States from attaining air superiority over the mainland because it has lost the majority of its air defenses. It is because of this that the United States has been able to introduce non-stealth bombers and attack aircraft into the conflict. This is something that we have witnessed with the advent of the B-1s, B-52s, and A-10s Warthogs in Iran. Even if Iran is still capable of posing a little threat through the use of isolated air defense units, the fact that 80% of its network is down opens the way for the United States and Israel to incorporate even more air power into their operations. After the initial shock and awe caused by the early strikes, this is essential to the maintenance of air power, which is a clue to another of the Great Five. In addition, this indicates that Iran is unable to escape the situation of having to deal with a growing number of attacks. Because of the removal of such a large number of air defenses, the remaining air defenses in the country are now more susceptible to attack. A greater number of opportunities for bombers and attack planes to carry out their missions are made available with each attack that is carried out against this component of Iran's military. On top of that, there are the launching of missiles. The Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) asserts that 70% of those launches have been eradicated, and we have witnessed the consequences of this in Iran's utilization of its ballistic missiles. Since the commencement of the conflict, the number of missile launches carried out by Iran has been steadily decreasing all throughout the fight. This drop has been plotted out by the Israeli Defense Forces, as reported by the Times of Israel. On the first day of the conflict, Iran fired 90 missiles toward Israel. On the next day, that number plummeted to 60. Approximately 1 week after the event, Iran launched 20 missiles every single day. However, it is now launching even fewer missiles than that. The number of launches that have been destroyed is the fundamental reason for this loss of firepower, and it is a devastating blow to Iran. There was a rationale for the nation's decision to construct a stockpile of more than 2,000 short-range ballistic missiles prior to the war, as well as other intentions to construct additional missiles. Its goal was to destroy both Israel and the United States by employing a missile swarm. Iran is unable to continue doing that. It can launch a very small number of missiles in comparison to the number of missiles it had planned to launch. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War for the United States of America, stated that strikes against Iran's drone launch facilities had resulted in a 95% decrease in the number of launches of unmanned aerial vehicles in comparison to the first day of Operation Epic Fury. This is a problem that continues to exacerbate the situation. Iran's whole military policy was based on the idea that it would be able to use these kinds of weapons. But the country's ability to launch offensive and defensive operations on the ground has been severely compromised. Furthermore, the situation is made even more dire by the fact that Iran has been rendered virtually ineffective at sea by the third of the Big Five. However, before we delve into that, if you are interested in seeing this kind of knowledge, you should subscribe to Conflict Report. We break it down in this manner each and every time. It is now Iran's Navy. This is not going very well. According to Admiral Brad Cooper, who is the commander of the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, the United States has destroyed or damaged more than 100 of Iran's naval boats. This information was revealed on March 16th. In light of the fact that Global Firepower states that Iran's Navy had 109 assets prior to Operation Epic Fury, this is quite an exceptional accomplishment. When all of these numbers are taken into consideration, it would appear that the United States had effectively eradicated the entire Iranian Navy from the face of the earth. Despite the fact that they might not, which is a possibility, given that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is in charge of a large number of fast boats that might not be formally a member of Iran's Navy, it is nevertheless the case that the United States is destroying naval targets left and right. With each of these assets that is destroyed, the threat that the Iranian Navy can pose to merchant ships that are going through the Strait of Hormuz is reduced. This is also true for the threat that the United States Navy poses to its presence in and around Iran's seas itself. Be patient with us, because what the United States of America is doing in that strait at the moment is the final of the major 5 movements. It has been reported by the Washington Post that satellite photographs taken from many of Iran's most important naval sites shed light on the magnitude of the damage that the United States has caused. The port of Bandar Abbas, which is not only one of Iran's greatest ports, but also an essential component of the country's strategy for the Strait of Hormuz, is currently experiencing the burning of warships, and it appears that at least one of Iran's submarines has been disabled. Ships that are located outside of Iranian waters have also been taken away by the United States. This may be seen in the incident that occurred with the Irish Dana, which was attacked by the United States Navy off the coast of Sri Lanka. As a result of the attack by the United States, that battleship is currently submerged in the depths of the Indian Ocean, along with at least 84 members of its crew. At the same time, the United States has removed 16 of Iran's mine-laying vessels. These vessels were meant to be used by Iran to place undersea mines along the Strait of Hormuz. As a result, the passage, which was already risky, has become even more dangerous for merchant ships that are attempting to transfer their goods through the strait. This third of the Big Five demonstrates how rapidly a nation's navy can be devastated when it is pitted against a nation that possesses significantly superior ships and perhaps most critically enormous aircraft carriers from which it can unleash strike after strike against vital ports. This is the case when the nation is engaged in a conflict with another nation. Iran has suffered the loss of a comprehensive range of naval assets, including frigates, drone carriers, submarines, ports, mine layers, maritime patrol planes, small surface combat ships, and virtually everything else that it would have relied on to deploy some kind of naval defense against the United States. In addition, this indicates that there is something comparable to what we are not observing in the skies above Iran now. Those skies allow American planes to fly with a high degree of impunity. It is now possible to say the same thing about the American aircraft carriers and naval strike groups that are currently stationed in the region of the Persian Gulf. Iran is in a position where it will not engage in any kind of ship-based conflict because it is afraid of losing what little assets it still possesses. The magnitude of damage has been so extreme that Iran is even in this position. However, it has been reduced to strikes against merchant ships by fast boats and unmanned surface vessels, which is not likely to do anything to impede the United States from continuing to bombard the Iranian mainland with air power based on its carriers in addition to bombers flying in from other sites. Speaking of air power, this gets us to the fourth of the Big Five, the United States' persistent pressure against Iran. This pressure is made possible by the thousands of sorties that are flown into the country. We touched on this previously when we were talking about how the United States has been able to send aircraft that it ordinarily would not have deployed if the aerial situation had remained dangerous. This is because Iran has lost a significant number of its air defenses. The employment of B-52 bombers to hit Iran is certainly the most obvious example. These bombers, which are more than 70 years old, are about the furthest thing from being stealthy in the United States' aerial arsenal. However, they are flying sorties over Iran because Iran's air defense network is so completely destroyed. Now let's take a look at some numbers. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, the United States asserts that it has successfully struck over 7,000 targets located throughout Iran. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War for the United States of America, has stated that almost 15,000 enemy targets had been hit when Israeli strikes are included on top of that. As of the time that this video was created, the battle has been going on since February 28th, which is equivalent to 19 days of attacks to this point. To put it another way, that is equivalent to an average of 789 targets being hit in Iran each and every single day. This is the definition of an air campaign that is extended over time. Both the United States of America and Israel have been successful in establishing a routine of flights that allows them to rotate their air force without Iran causing any kind of retaliation. It is possible for a fighter plane or many fighter jets to take off from a carrier strike, return, refuel, and reload, and then take off again over the course of several days. When you multiply that by dozens upon dozens of fighter jets flying across American carriers that are departing from Israel and those that are taking off from US facilities that are located near to Iran, you get a hit pattern that repeats itself without interruption, and Iran has no response to it. The culmination of all of this is the methodical deterioration of a military and Iranian regime that has been in existence for more than 4 decades, and the American Air Force is making this possible. There are simply too many strikes to enumerate here, but some of the most significant ones include the attacks on Kharg Island that were discussed earlier, which may shortly be followed up on, and the United States using its enormous ordnance penetrators that weigh between 30,000 and 30,000 pounds against the underground bunker known as Taliban II. Moreover, now that the United Kingdom has granted permission to the United States to utilize its facilities, notably RAF, Fairford, the bomber pilots of the United States are no longer need to make the grueling round-trip flights that they were making in order to launch their strikes earlier in the conflict. In order to reach Iran, the distance that must be traveled has been reduced. It is now possible to avoid traveling through the entire Atlantic Ocean. In addition, this indicates that American bombers are now able to launch attacks against Iran at a much faster rate than they were previously able to, joining a rotation of fighter jets that was already non-stop. During the early stages of Operation Epic Fury, we witnessed the initial stages of Iran's air defenses and missile capabilities being dismantled. With the fourth of the Big Five, the United States is now destroying every facet of Iran's industrial foundation that it is able to fire upon, including missile production facilities, subterranean complexes, command and control centers, and more. Eliminating Iran's military is no longer the exclusive objective at this point. It is about making it so that the Iranian military will never be able to rebuild, at least while it is being bombarded with this overwhelming amount of air force. While this is the case, Iran does have one piece of power that it urgently clings to. The Strait of Hormuz is the final of the Big Five, and this brings us full circle to the destination. The Strait of Hormuz is widely regarded as one of the most significant waterways in the entire globe, particularly with regard to the transit of oil that is carried by sea. With a daily volume of 21 million barrels, this strait is responsible for transporting almost 1/5 of the world's oil commerce. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is only 24 miles wide, making it a very easy waterway for Iran to patrol. In spite of the fact that there is some traffic traveling across the strait, it is passing through at a very slow pace in comparison to what we should be seeing. Why this is the case is obvious. Iran has made threats to attack ships that are passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and it has already carried out such threats on multiple occasions. As a result of the fact that the strait is still effectively blocked off, we have also witnessed the price of oil shot up to more than $100 per barrel, where it is still hovering. This is Iran's final plan of action: to obstruct the strait, to create turmoil in the oil business, and to have faith that the pressure that is generated would be sufficient to convince the United States to retreat. It is not functioning properly. Direct strikes near the Strait of Hormuz have become the focus of the United States' concern, in addition to requests for its allies to join in the protection of commercial ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. These calls have been followed by a handful of critiques and vague threats to those who do not wish to get involved. The United States began bombarding Iranian missile launch facilities near the Strait of Hormuz with bunker-busting bombs on March 17th, according to the news that broke as it was breaking. This news was conveyed directly by CENTCOM in an X post where it was said that the United States military had successfully utilized numerous deep penetrator munitions weighing 5,000 pounds each on fortified Iranian missile positions along Iran's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. This may appear to be yet another attack on Iran's missile launch sites. However, the purpose of these specific strikes is to prevent Iran's anti-ship cruise missiles from striking merchant ships in the strait. These missiles are capable of launching missiles against ships. Following the destruction of Iran's military and leadership institutions, as well as the imposition of a major threat to the country's economy, the United States is now aggressively guarding one of the most important waterways in the world, and it is possible that other protections will be forthcoming. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit is also going to be deployed to the Middle East by the United States. This unit, which is comprised of approximately 2,200 United States Marines and possesses equipment that includes amphibious assault vessels, is not scheduled to arrive until the end of March. However, once it arrives in the Persian Gulf region, it may begin conducting coastal raids against key Iranian military nodes that are located along the coast of the Strait of Hormuz. The ports and missile launch sites that have already been damaged may be completely taken over by the United States. This would enable the United States to establish a buffer zone into which it could position air defenses, so reducing the danger that Iran poses to the strait from further into the mainland. When the crisis in the waterway settles down, France is considering joining the United States in protecting that strait. If other nations join the United States in doing so, Iran will lose its final piece of leverage. The Iranian regime, which is in the process of disintegrating, is hoping that the sudden increase in the price of oil will halt the United States in its tracks. Instead of giving in to the pressure, the United States of America has released the fifth of the Big Five missiles on the Strait of Hormuz. And it is possible that it has a great deal more in store for them in the future. Iran has been shattered by a series of consecutive catastrophic blows. In the case of Operation Epic Fury, the Big Five demonstrated that the United States possesses all of the cards. The Iranian regime and its military infrastructure are both deteriorating day by day. Iran's military infrastructure is also degrading. And once the United States follows up, most likely by launching attacks against further nodes in the Strait of Hormuz and against Kharg Island, an already precarious situation for Iran will only become far more dire. In addition, none of this makes any mention of the fact that the United States has also sent weapons that look like they were taken straight from a science fiction movie to Operation Epic Fury. Iran's attempts to utilize drones to attack the United States are being thwarted by lasers, which are currently in play. Would you like to learn how to do it? However, if you are interested in learning more about the ultra-modern weaponry that Iran could never have anticipated being released, then you should watch our movie. In addition, if you found this video to be enjoyable, be sure to subscribe to Conflict Report so that you can view other coverage of the Iran war. Also, I am grateful that you watched.